Yes, which is Hare Krishna. So thank you. Welcome, everyone. So today we start the unit 9, which will include the 4 chapters, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a very interesting section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And let's start with today, chapter 5, entitled Vidura's Talks with Maitreya, text 1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo.
Yeah, just a minute. I'm going to put my video. And then I'll.
Are you putting your YouTube on?
Come again. I'll minute, and I will remove the offering, and then I'll put it on back.
So you can share the thing from your screen.
The screen.
Sri Sukha Uvacha Dvaridyo Nadya Rishabha Kurunam Maitreyang Ashinang Agada Buddham Shatto Pashit Chachutta Bhava Siddha Prapacha Shuli Shaushalya Guna Vibritya. Sukdev Goswami said, Vidura, the best amongst the Kuru dynasty, who was perfect in devotional service to the Lord, thus reached the source of the celestial Ganges, and where Maitreya, the great fathomless learned sage of the world, was seated. Vidura, who was perfect in gentleness and satisfied in transcendence, inquired from him. Vidura was already perfect in his unalloyed devotion to the infallible Lord. It's a good point because Vidura was a pure devotee of Krishna. The Lord and the living entities are all qualitatively one, same by nature. However, the Lord is quantitatively much greater than any individual living entity. He is ever infallible, whereas the living entities are prone to fall under the illusory energy. Vidura had already surpassed the fallible nature of the living entity in conditional life due to his being Achyuta Bhava. So this is a very nice term that Srila Prabhupada is using here, which is Achyuta Bhava, and it's from the purport, from the verse. He says, Shatto Pashitya Achyuta Bhava Siddha. So if you look at the verse translation of the word meaning, Siddha means perfect, Achyuta, the infallible Lord, Bhava means character. Okay? So he has that incredible character of being Achyuta Bhava in a mood of non-conditioned soul, so to speak. Conditioned souls are not Achyuta. We are fallible. The conditioned souls are fallible. But here in this case, he's Achyuta Bhava, Siddha. This stage of life is called Achyuta Bhava Siddha, or perfection by dint of devotional service. So we may, what is the difference between a perfected being and an Achyuta Bhava Siddha? So we're approaching Krishna in the mode of devotional service. So we're doing the very right thing that we should be doing. Anyone, therefore, who is absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord is a liberated soul. Therefore, anyone, therefore, who is absorbed in the devotional service of the Lord is a liberated soul and has all admirable qualities. Interesting point. So we may not be perfect, but we are absorbed in the service, so we're going in the right direction. We'll be there. Achyuta bhava siddha. Almost like attain perfection by practicing this devotional service. The learned sage Maitreya was sitting in a solitary place on the bank of the Ganges at Haridwar. The learned sage Maitreya was sitting in a solitary place on the bank of the Ganges at Haridwar. And Vidura, who was the perfect devotee of the Lord. So Maitreya was already there on the banks of the river Ganges in Haridwar. And Vidura, who was a perfect devotee of the Lord and possessed all good transcendental qualities, approached him for inquiry. The question arises, is there a need when you're a perfected being to inquire? So you will see this is very interesting. If you take from chapter 16, where the four Kumaras went to Vaikuntha, and they actually had a small mishap and they cursed Jai Vijay, there's a whole episode that develops. So they were perfected beings too in the mood of jnana, but they had no knowledge of different rasas of the Supreme Lord and how the Lord interacts and deals with his devotees. So they made a small mistake there. So even though one may be perfect in devotional service, by dint of devotional service, Achyuta Bhava Siddha, there's always a possibility that one can always upgrade because there's higher rasas, higher level of spiritual realization. So that's why Vidura has approached Maitreya for this reason. Vidura uvacha sukhaya karmani karoti loko nate shukham banyat uparamam va vindeta bhuyastataeva dukkham yadatra yuktam bhagavan vadena. Vidura said, "O great sage, everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness. Everyone in this world engages in fruitive activities to attain happiness, but one finds neither satiation nor the mitigation of distress. On the contrary, one is only aggravated by such activities." Right? So if we're worshipping different demigods for getting different results from following Vedic principles, which is actually karma kanda, Vedic rituals, then we may get certain happiness, but then we will not be completely free from distress and we will not be completely happy inside. Sometimes when we approach the demigods and the process of fruitive activities to get material benefits, we can actually be put in an aggravated situations because material nature doesn't always respond according to our wishes. She responds according to plan of the Lord. And the plan of the Lord is to not make the living entities comfortable in this world. So he said, please therefore give us direction on how one should live for real happiness. So one way to try to attain happiness is through this process of fruitive activities. And the other is what is Vidura inquiring about from Maitreya Rishi. So one of you can read this purport, please. I'll get some water.
Hare Krishna. I will read, Prabhuji.
Read, Prabhu.
Purport. Vidura asked Maitreya some common questions, which was not originally his intention. Uddhava asked Vidura to approach Maitreya Muni and inquire into the truth concerning the Lord, his name, fame, qualities, form, pastime, entourages, etc., And thus, when Vidura approached Maitreya, he should have asked only about the Lord. But out of natural humility, he did not immediately ask about the Lord, but inquire into subject which would be of great importance to the common man. A common man cannot understand the Lord. He must first know the real position of his life under the influence of the illusionary energy. In illusion, one thinks that he can be happy only by fruitive activities. But what actually happens is that one becomes more and more entangled in the network of action and reaction and does not find any solution in the problem of life. There is a nice song in this connection. Because of a great desire to have all happiness in life, I built this house. But unfortunately, the whole scheme has turned to ashes because the house was unexpectedly set on fire. A laws of nature is like that. Everyone tries to become happy by planning in the material world. But the law of nature is so cruel that it sets fire to one's schemes. The fruitive worker is not happy in his schemes, nor is there any situation of his continuous hankering for happiness.
Do we need any explanation on this? We all have experience of this. Strange circumstances in life. We plan and it doesn't go according to plan because this is just what it is. But the first part of the purport, what Prabhupada says, that out of natural humility, Vidura did not approach the Lord naturally, directly, but inquired into the subject of spiritual matter transcendence from Maitreya Rishi. So he was thinking, I hope you remember that in the early chapters of the third canto, it was discussed, I can't remember whether it's first or second, that Vidura, he went on pilgrimage and he did not actually consider himself purified and qualified enough to approach the Supreme Lord, so he went on pilgrimage. Why? Because of his association with Duryodhan and the Kuru clan, the house of the Kurus. So he felt like he needed to purify his existence because he has lived under the shelter of people who are inimical to the Vaishnavas. Namely, Duryodhan and his brothers who were not very happy with the devotees of Krishna, the Pandavas. So therefore, he felt like he needed to purify himself. So he did not feel so much qualified. This is a very natural but beautiful humility of the Supreme Lord. Okay. Janasya Krishna vimukhasya deivat adharmashilasya sudukhitasya anugrahaye yacharandinunnam bhutani bhavyani janardanasya. O my Lord, great philanthropic souls travel on the earth on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to show compassion to the fallen souls who are adverse to the sense of subordination to the Lord. So he said, "O my Lord, great philanthropic souls travel on the earth on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to show compassion to the fallen souls. So they spread them thin sometimes, the conditioned souls. The liberated souls. They have compassion for the Lord. So their mood is, let's go and spread the message of Krishna consciousness. Right? So these are the great spiritual salvationists, spiritual leaders, Jagat Gurus, sannyasis, gurus, and senior devotees always traveling and trying to spread the message of Krishna. It becomes part of you. And it doesn't require much effort to think that because it's just the way you live in life is you try to actually serve Krishna like this. So let's see text 4. Tat sadhuvaryadi savatma samna sangradito bhagavan yena pungsam vidistito yachati bhakti putte jnanam sasattva digamam purana. Therefore, great sage, please give me instruction on the transcendental devotional service of the Lord, so that he who is situated in the heart of everyone can be pleased to impart from within knowledge of the absolute truth in terms of the ancient Vedic principles delivered only to those who are purified by the process of devotional service. So when he approached Maitreya, he said that he wanted to know more about the transcendental devotional service of the Lord. Right? So here the Lord can impart this knowledge as Chaitya Guru from within the heart. Right? And also from ancient Vedic principles, which is there explained in the Bhakti Shastras. So he's approaching in a very official, very sweet manner the Maitreya Rishi. So these are, let's go to text 5. Karoti karamani kritavataru yani atmatantro bhagavan tyadishya yathasa sarga jagra idang rihiram Sangstapya vrittim jagato vidhatte. O great sage, kindly narrate how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the independent, desireless Lord of the free worlds, and the controller of all energies, accepts incarnations and creates the cosmic manifestation with perfectly arranged regulative principles for its maintenance. So what is asking here? Look, very interesting this verse. Please note. Thus, in this text 5, here, he is saying, please narrate how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? He is the controller and the controller of all energies, and how he creates his cosmic manifestation with perfectly arranged regulative principles. So he asking about Sarga, Visarga, and Sthanam. Do you follow me? If you don't, please ask. Is that clear? What is the question is all about? He's asking about the free Purushas. How do they accept incarnations? And how do they create and maintain this world? So what is he asking about here? He's asking about Sharga, Visharga, and Sthanam, maintenance of the world. And he's asking about primary creation and secondary creation. Right? So he's wanting to understand the whole scheme of how the Lord maintains, creates, and destroys this world, and to what purpose. That is an inquiry of Vidura with Maitreya. So someone can read the purport.
Okay, let me read. Please let me read.
Please read.
Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, from whom the three creative incarnations, namely the Purusha avatars, Karanu Dagasai Vishnu, Garbo Dagasai Vishnu, and Shiru Dagasai Vishnu, expand. The whole material creation is conducted by the three Purushas in successive stages under the external energy of the Lord, and thus material nature is controlled by him. Thinking material nature to be independent is like seeking milk from the nipple-like bags on the neck of a goat. The Lord is independent and desireless. He does not create the material world for his own satisfaction as we create our household affairs to fulfill our material desires. Actually, the material world is created for the illusory enjoyment of the conditioned souls who have been against the transcendental service of the Lord since time immemorial. But the material universes are full in themselves. There is no scarcity for maintenance in the material world. Because of their poor fund of knowledge, the materialists are disturbed when there is an apparent increase of population on the earth. Whenever there is a living being on the earth, however, his subsistence is immediately arranged by the Lord. The other species of living entities who far outnumber human society, are never disturbed for maintenance. They are never seen dying of starvation. It is only human society that is disturbed about the food situation and to cover up the real fact of administrative mismanagement, takes shelter in the plea that the population is excessively increasing. If there is any scarcity in the world, it is the scarcity of God consciousness. Otherwise, by the grace of the Lord, there is no scarcity of anything. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
So it's interesting. Prabhupada is saying that there's more animals and other living beings. They outnumber humans, but they're all being maintained, and they don't, obviously they don't work, they don't do anything. Right? So they depend on the Supreme Lord for maintenance. But the Lord has created a perfect society for the humans and the animals and the demigods and everyone. He's created a perfect society. Those who follow the laws of nature, mostly the animals, the humans don't follow the laws of nature. The animals follow automatically the laws of nature. They do not incur karma, and they are maintained. Of course, only by the sinful, wrong acts of the humans that the animals end up suffering or being slaughtered. So it's interesting, the Prabhupada's angle is quite interesting in this, that the only scarcity is if we had no scarcity of Krishna consciousness, everyone was properly educated, then nothing would be a problem. Nothing would be a problem because the Lord has created the world. He created the male and female and they reproduce. And then he has created a situation where some living entities are food for another, and then each produce and they live, and then they sometimes animals consume grains, and sometimes animal consumes other animals, but it's a perfect creation. It's a perfect ecological creation, ecological balance, environmental balance that the Lord has created. And everyone is living. Everyone is living very nicely, except when the human being comes and interact. So text 5 is there now, text 6. So in text 6 says, Yatha punah sve khaidam nivesha sete guhayam nivritta vritti yogeshwaradishwara ekaeta anupravisto bahudavathas yathasit. He lies down on his own heart, spread in the form of a sky, and thus placing whole creation in that space, he expands himself into many living entities, which are manifested as different species of life. He does not have to endeavor for his maintenance, because he is a master of all mystic powers and the proprietor of everything. Thus, he is distinct from the living entity. So here the Lord is talking about the Virat Rupa. So he is fixed in the space of his heart, sleep in Viraja river. And how does he enter into the universe and expand into many forms? This is what he's talking about here. Okay, so you see the reference is all very clear. So Prabhupada is explaining very nicely. He lies down on his heart, spread in the form of sky, and thus placing the whole creation in that space. Kind of difficult to understand. But he expands himself into many living entities. How? As Virat. He gives the blueprint for creation of all the universe and all the everything. So let me read the purport. Yes, you have a question, Salika? I can't hear you.
Yes, Krishna, there's feedback online.
Rasavan, you can mute if you.
Yes.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. My question is, and that text number 5, there's something that I need you to clarify, because when we look at the Western philosophy and Krishna consciousness teachings, there is this statement made in the purport by Srila Prabhupada that the Lord actually does not create the material world for his own satisfaction as we create our household affairs to fill our material desires. Then he concluded that sentence by saying, actually, the material world is created for the illusory enjoyment of the conditioned souls. So the Western philosophy understanding of God's creation is that everything is created for the living entity's enjoyment. Though Srila Prabhupada uses the word illusory here, but if one is not deeply rooted in Krishna consciousness, may not understand that word, which is what distinguishes illusory energy. So I want you to elaborate on that, because the concept of the Western philosopher, Africans generally, is that the material world is our enjoyment, and that is the concept of, even in the Genesis of the Bible, God has created the material world, created so many things, and he has given us dominion. So we should enjoy everything. So I need a clarification on that.
Yes, but not in the sense like he's created it because the desire of the living entity is to enjoy. So he gives you facility to enjoy because that's what you wanted. But he cannot give you that kind of enjoyment in the spiritual world. So he'll give you your own world where you can play, you can pretend to be the driver of a toy engine instead of a proper big engine, and like a baby, like a child who is in illusion, thinking that because he's driving his small toy bus, he's driving the big bus. So the Lord actually, he gives us this facility because that's what our desire was, to enjoy separate from him. But that's why he gives us this. Yes, so you can say it is, and as long as you endeavor to enjoy the material nature, it will be your dominion, except that the reality is different. But the full force of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, that material nature is an energy by itself that will dominate and frustrate the aspirations of the living entity who wants to spread his dominion over the material nature. That bit of understanding they don't have, because they are more or less, you see, what is lacking in there is Shakti Parinamavad. Shakti Parinamavad means that the Lord has different energies. They don't understand that the Lord has different energies. So through his different energies, he creates. Through his different energies, he maintains. And through his different energies, he will also frustrate you, which is an illusory energy, right? And it becomes a dominion of that. They don't have that. So in our Vedic philosophy, Salika Prabhu, we understand that the Lord is there, but he also has Vivida. He has also different energies. He also has different energies. What is that verse? Vivida Shriyate Swabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriyacha. I forgot the first part. That the Lord, he has different energies of jnana, of knowledge, and of creation. And those energies are there functioning in this world. But they don't have the understanding of that the Lord, they think that the Lord personally does everything. So if you ask in the Christian theology, they said, the God says that there be creation and there was creation. But can they explain the phenomena by which the Lord said, let there be creation, there was creation? Do they know that different energies of the Lord act to make different incarnations, different forms, different emanations and plenary expansions of the Lords that do these activities? No, they don't understand that. So it's a very incomplete theology. Are you agree with me on that?
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted it to be explained, because I think I was in a television program one day, and somebody, it's a panel program, and a theologian, Christian theologian, he came up with two actual verses in the scriptures, in our scriptures. And one is when Prabhupada gave, in the Bhagavad Gita, I think chapter 2 somewhere, where Prabhupada was talking about that the sacrifice of animals is also allowed in Vedic scriptures, but it is for a particular purpose. He didn't read that. He just read that in the Vedic tradition, there is allowance of
Yes, they
sacrifice
will
of
pick
animals.
and they will
So,
pick
and
and bits and
also
pieces.
it picked up on this issue of that the material world is made for human enjoyment, but it's meant for enjoyment, but that doesn't mean that is the purpose of the human existence. The purpose of human existence is different from the fact that, just like you gave a good example, that the father is not like he wants the child to drive a car, but because the car wants to, just to distract him, so he gives him that toy car.
But the reality also is, do they really enjoy? Look at the suffering, wholesale suffering around you in the world. Is that enjoyment in this world? So, okay, we'll go to. So we read the text 6, or I'll read it. The question regarding creation, maintenance, and destruction, which are mentioned in various parts of the Srimad Bhagavatam, are in relation to different millenniums, kalpas. Therefore, they are differently described by different authorities and questioned by different students. There's no difference regarding the creative principle and the Lord's control over them. Yet there are some difference in the minute details because of the different kalpas. So sometimes in different kalpas, there's different destructions and different creations. So there are minute details. So he wanted to know about that. Okay? So not just he wanted to know about Sharga, Visharga, but there are also Naimitic Pralay, according to each universe, according to each yuga, according to each cycle of 1,000 yugas, which is a kalpa. There are different things that happen. There's Manvantaras also. It's all included in there. Okay. So let me read text 7. Kridang vidate dujago suranam semai karmanyavatar bhedai Manona tripyati yapi shinvatangna shushlokamole charitamritani. You may narrate also about the auspicious characteristics of the Lord in his different incarnations for the welfare of the twice born, the cows and the demigods. Our minds are never satisfied completely, although we continuously hear of his transcendental activities. So you may narrate also about the auspicious. So he's asking about what here? Auspicious characteristics of the Lord in his different incarnations. Ishanu Katha. So he's asking about different things, about the different pastimes of the Lord, characteristics of the Lord. This is Ishanu Katha. And the welfare of the twice born, the cows and the demigod. This is Sthanam, maintenance. The Varnashram system is meant for the protection and the maintenance of the twice born, which can also be Poshanam. Poshanam in protection of the Brahmanas. And maintaining the cows and the rule of the demigods to provide everything is Sthanam. It's how the Lord arranged for maintenance. I'm talking about the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam here. He's asking about those things. So now you follow, right? What are the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam? Atra, Sarga, Visharga, Sthanam, Uti, Utaya, Poshanam, Ishanu Katha, Manvantara, and then Nirodha, Yukti, and Ashraya. So he's asking these things. You can see it there in this chapter. Although we continuously hear his transcendental activities. So he wanted to know about Ishanu Katha, right, which is a topic, right? So the Lord, so you can read that purport. It's very basic purport. It's nothing too intense. So we'll move on. Yastai Bedairadi Lokanato Lokan Lokan Sahalap Lokapalan Achikla Yatra Hisha Sarvasatva Nikaya Bhedo Trikrita Pratithai. The Supreme King of all kings has created different planets and places of habitation. The Supreme King of all kings has created different planets and places of habitation, where living entities are situated in terms of the modes of nature and work. And he has created their different kings and rulers. So here, this is again Sthanam. He has created different planetary systems, which is explained in the 4th and in the 5th canto. This is Thanam, which means that he's created a situation where according to our fruitive activities, we can live in different planets. Right? So Supreme King of all kings has created different planets and places of habitation where all living entities are situated in different modes of work and work. He has created a place for the Gyanis in Janalok, for the Maharshis in Mahalok, for the Tapasvis in Tapalok, for the different demigods in Swargalok, 14 planetary systems, and for the lower planetary systems, he includes Atal, Vital, and so he's asking about those. You will see how Maitreya will answer these things. And he has created their different kings and rulers. So he explains about that too. Right? So it's very basic. Please read this purport. I'm not going to go into the basics of these for right now. So let me just go for text 9. Yeah, but actually what I'm saying to you, the most essential things in the verses. So you can see that Maitreya here in the text, when he asks about the different pastimes of the Lord, he's asking about the different incarnations, the Leela avatars. Right? In the 6th, he asks about the Virat Rupa. In the 7th, he asks about the Leela avatar. Right? In the 8th, he's asked about all the different planetary systems he's created with their rulers and the different modes of natures present in these different planetary systems. Right? This is text 5th canto. Then 9, how does the Lord, here, what does he ask? He asks, Yena prajanam uta atma karma rupabhidanam chabhidam vyadhata narayano visharga atma yoni itakchano varnayam vipravarya. O chief amongst the Brahmanas, please also describe how Narayan, the creator of the universe and the self-sufficient Lord, has differently created the natures, activities, forms, features, and names of the different living entities. So here, in this 8, the Lord, in the 9, the Lord, he created the different natures, different activities, different forms, features, names of different living creatures. This is actually Visarga of Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma who creates actually the different bodies. Lord Vishnu, he creates all the different elements and he gives the different elements. Mind, intelligence, force, ego, the 5 gross elements, 5 subtle senses, 5 gross, all that ingredients for creation is given. Then combining them to make different living beings, different creatures with different qualities, it is a work of Brahma. So here he says, when, O chief among the Brahmanas, please describe how Narayan, the creator of the universe and the self-sufficient Lord, has created the natures, activities, forms, etc. He's talking about what Brahma does, but through the agency of the Supreme Lord. Sorry, how the Supreme Lord does through the agency of Lord Brahma. Okay? Okay, so let's go to 10. You will not notice what I'm saying here, but this is actually I'm relating it to what will Maitreya be speaking. You will see very soon he starts to talk about the creation. Maitreya Rishi starts to talk about the process of creation, as from text 22. But here it's a whole lot of questions that I'm not going to much detail. He's asking a whole lot of questions. Tell me about this, tell me about this, tell me about this, tell me about this. So he goes on. And then Maitreya Rishi, honored by Viduras, and expressed gratitude. Oh, okay, I will do that. So Maitreya, then as from text 22, you will see in the subject breakdown, Maitreya Rishi starts to explain the process of creation again. The different angle of the process of creation. I hope you can all attend and discuss this. It's very interesting how he describes creation from a different angle. Slightly different angle, the text 22. I'm just situating the whole chapter for you, okay? So that's what it's happening here. So now in text 10 to 16, here Vidura does not so much ask about the creation, the different sthanam, the different so the primary creation, secondary creation, creation of elements, and so on. And he doesn't ask about the different lila avatars, and he doesn't ask about the sthanam, the different situations, different planetary systems that are created by the Lord for different living beings. Now from 10 to 16, he starts to ask about the exclusive interest in Krishna Katha. So 10 to 16, these 7 verses, Vidura has exclusive interest in Krishna Katha. So we can read these verses. So 10, he says, Paravase Paravareshang Bhagavan Vratani Shrutani Me Vyasa Mukhadda Bhikshnam Atrip Numan Shula Shukha Tesham Rite Krishna Kritang Gatot Ghat. Oh my Lord, I have repeatedly heard about these high and lower status of human society from the mouth of Vyasadeva. And I have had enough of all these lesser subject matters and their happiness. Interesting what Vidura is saying. What has he heard? We look in the purport that Vyasadeva was his father. Vyasadeva was a constant visitor to the house of Dhritarashtra. So he has always spoken about these things. Lower and higher status of human society. She said, these are, I have enough of these. Just like we don't want to read newspapers, we don't want to know what's going on, all these different things in different societies. Vidura also, he said, I have had enough of this politics and sociology and society and anthropology. You know, we've heard about all of this, the history of humankind. And sometimes, you know, you may want to go and see something in the YouTube and then, you know, I'll shift through. Enough, the same thing they're going to talk about. So it's a little bit like this for Vidura. You following me, Prabhu? Yeah?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. So he said, oh my Lord, oh my Lord, I have repeatedly heard about these higher and lower status of human society. So he said, they have not satisfied me with the nectar of topics about Krishna. So unless we have topics of nectar about Krishna, we're not satisfied. So he's not so interested. But he asks about how the world is created, how the Lord maintains and everything. And then he moves on to Krishna Katha. So he doesn't go, okay, the world is created, the world is maintained. So let's go and see what is happening in this material world. He doesn't worry about that. He knows about the involvement of the Supreme Lord in creating, manifesting, and how all this is done for the glory of the Lord, for the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then he says, tell me directly about Krishna Katha. And this is what Vidura is saying. So please read the topic. So Prabhupada says in the last part, the 2 most important Krishna Katha current in the world, the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita is Krishna Katha because it is spoken by Krishna, whereas Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna Katha because it narrates about Krishna. Okay, so please read through. It's very basics here. But maybe I will read one thing in there to make the difference between the Puranas and Mahabharata, and also the Vyasadeva had written the Mahabharata. So Prabhupada does say about that most important part of the Srimad Mahabharata is actually Bhagavad Gita. And that was automatically taught, you know, in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, because the Mahabharata war was part of the history of the Great India, Mahabharata. So the Bhagavad Gita was included in there, right? But because there were insufficient topics, Prabhupada will speak about this in the purport, but I'm just paraphrasing everything. Prabhupada said there was insufficient topics of narration directly of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, he said, please repeatedly do so. Anyone can give me a reference of a similar kind of instructions given to Vyasadeva? Here Vidura is asking, I do not want to hear about these older topics, sociology, politics, and this and that. There was a similar in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto. Narad Muni, in the 4th chapter and 5th chapter, Narad Muni comes to Vyasadeva and he said that you're feeling despondent. You can read 1:4:30, 31. And he says, you're feeling despondent because you have not sufficiently glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He has written Mahabharata, he has written the Puranas, he has written the Vedas, he has done all of that, Vedanta Sutra, yes, but not enough direct glorification of the Supreme Lord. And Narad Muni, he kind of hinted to him, look, this is why you're feeling so unhappy, so despondent, not unhappy, but despondent. And so Maitreya Rishi, when he's approached by Vidura, Vidura is saying to him, don't tell me about these things. I've heard enough of it from Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva himself has written a whole load of things and he was not satisfied. You get the gist of it? So here he says, right, because there were not sufficient topics directly concerning Krishna in the Puranas, in the Mahabharata, etc., it did not satisfy him. So he's approached Maitreya for direct appreciation of Krishna's qualities and character and pastimes and so on. Okay, so any question? Anyone? Prabhu, you should definitely know that the pastimes of Narad Muni when he appears after Vyasadeva had compiled all the Vedic literatures, he was sitting despondent. This is a very common thing, we should all know, that Narad Muni appeared at that time and he said, my dear Prabhu, you have not sufficiently and repeatedly and repetitively and in a direct manner glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's where he gets the instructions to write the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And there is in the 7th canto, there is, in the 7th chapter, there's a meditation of Vyasadeva. There's a Vyasadeva Samadhi. And that Vyasadeva Samadhi was actually where he sees the Lord with material energy, standing in a shamed way. And he sees the Lord gives him the full darshan of himself and his energies. And then he takes that from his meditation, from his samadhi. Vyasadeva actually writes the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is part of the understanding. So you can make some research and look at the net or wherever, and maybe also in the Sandarbhas, the Samadhi of Vyasadeva. So once he's instructed by Narad Muni, he goes into trance and he sees everything, and that's how he writes the Srimad Bhagavatam. So what he sees, how does he see? Okay? So we can continue with text 11. I will stop at 12:30 today because I've already had an intense morning. So text 11. Who in human society can be satisfied without hearing sufficient talk of the Lord, whose lotus feet are the sum total of all places of pilgrimage, and is worshipped by great sages and devotees? Such topics can cut off one's bondage to family affection simply by entering the holes of one's ear. So when we hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Karnarandhrena, Saroruham, it is actually when he goes through, he says Karnanadim, the holes of the ear. Here it says. So when we hear about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it cuts the bondage to family affection. So we will read because it's glorification of Krishna Katha. So one of you can read the text in the purport here. To text 11.
Can I read, Prabhuji?
Yes. Jyotishwara Prabhu.
Okay. Purport.
Yes,
Krishna
purport.
Katha is so powerful that simply by entering into person's ear, it can at once give deliverance from the bondage of family affection. Family affection is an illusionary manifestation of the external energy, and it is the only impetus of the mundane activities. As long as there is mundane activity and the mind is absorbed in such engagement, one has to undergo the repetition of birth and death in the current material nascence. People are most influenced by the mode of ignorance, and some are influenced by the possession mode of material nature. And under the spell of these two modes, a living being is actuated by the material conception of life. The mundane quality do not allow a living entity to understand his real position. The qualities of both ignorance and passion strongly bind one to the illusionary body conception of the life of the self. The best among the fools who are thus deluded are those who engage in the altruistic activities under the spell of material mode of passion. Bhagavad Gita, which is direct Krishna Katha, gives humanity the elementary lesson that the body is perishable and that the consciousness which is spread throughout the body is imperishable. The conscious being, the imperishable self, is eternally existent and cannot be killed under any circumstances. Even after the dissolution of the body, anyone who misunderstands the perishable body to be the self and who works for it in the name of the psychology, politics, philanthropy, altruism, nationalism, or the internationalism under the false play of bodily conception of life is certainly a fool and does not know the implications of reality and unreality. Some of them are above the mode of ignorance and passion and are situated in the mode of goodness. But mundane goodness is always contaminated by things of ignorance and passion. Mundane goodness can enlighten one that the body and the self are different. And one in goodness is concerned with the self and not the body. But due to being contaminated, those in mundane goodness cannot understand the real nature of the self as a person. Their impersonal conception of the self as a distinct from the body keeps them in the mode of goodness within the material nature. And unless they are attracted by Krishna Katha, they will never be liberated from the bondage of material existence. Krishna Katha is the only remedy for all people of the world because it can situate one in pure consciousness of the self and liberate one from the material bondage. To preach Krishna Katha all over the world, as recommended by Lord Chaitanya, is the greatest missionary activity, and all sensible men and women of the world may join this great movement started by Lord Chaitanya. Hare Krishna.
So Prabhupada is just repetitively saying the same thing. You know, we need to get out of the mode of passion and ignorance, and we need to be situated in the mode of goodness to begin with, and thereon move to the mode of transcendental. This can be achieved by simply hearing Krishna Katha. Krishna Katha is the most important process by which hearing Krishna Katha, the most is Shravanam, hearing and hearing and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing and hearing and hearing Krishna Katha, hearing and hearing Krishna Lila, and Bhagavad Gita will actually take us far beyond any other process. So Prabhupada is saying to preach Krishna Katha all over the world. People don't think like that. But Prabhupada is very radical, even though it is simple. He's very radical. He says, preaching Krishna Katha around the world is recommended by Lord Chaitanya. It's a great missionary activities. So, like Shadika Prabhu was saying, in the missionary movements of the Christians and the others, they don't have that. They don't have that. So it's mostly coming to appreciating the grandeur, the high position of the Lord, but no more. So therefore, at best, a very good, perfect Christian gentleman, he will attain Shantaraj if he's following all the rules and regulations and appreciate the greatness of God. And he's completely in awe of it. And he is very humble. He will attain that. But he has no understanding, just like the four Kumaras when they go to the Vaikuntha. They have no idea of, they've been hearing about the Supreme Lord a lot. That's why they wanted to go and meet him. So that triggered their desire for understanding. Just like now, Vidura is a great devotee of the Lord, but he wants to hear more Krishna Katha. So this section of the missionary activities of teaching Krishna Katha around the universe, it's quite an amazing presentation by Srila Prabhupada. So all the other religious systems, they have no Krishna Katha. Do they have pastimes of God? Pastimes of Allah? Allah doesn't have any pastimes. Allah doesn't have a form. In the Christian missionary activities, they accept the Lord as being powerful, omnipotent, omnipresent, and so on and so forth, right? But not in a theological way, understand it, how he can be present everywhere. Do they understand that the Lord is present in your heart and he can see your feelings and he can understand you? Is there? Come on. No. So they have no Paramatma realization. But they think that the Lord is a person. Do they think the Lord is a person?
Few let me call them self-realized
Christians
and Muslim also, like the a particular branch of the Sufi Muslims, they have an idea, but they always think that I'm talking about the devil. And one of my Muslim scholar was just calling. That particular Muslim scholars group, they have an understanding that, but they do not have understanding that it can be attained. It's something attainable. One can understand it, one can relate to it. They don't have it. So there's no practicality of it in those traditions. It's only in Krishna consciousness.
How will they reach transcendence? Difficult.
Yeah, very difficult.
Very difficult. So very good point here. Prabhupada is saying missionary activity throughout the world. Yeah, Rasavan Prabhu, you're saying something? No, he's talking to someone else. Okay. So in short, the text 11, we can say that human society can be satisfied only by the lotus feet of the Supreme Lords and his activities. Okay, so such activities will cut off the bondage simply by entering the holes of the ears, the transcendental qualities. And this verse is a very important verse. Kastrupya tirthapada budhayat. So now we read text 12. In the text 12 is a very nice presentation by Vidura. Look what he says to Maitreya Rishi. Munir vivakshur bhagavad gunanam sakapite bharatamaha Krishna yashvinranam gramya sukhanuvadir matir grihitta anuharer kathayam. Your friend. Whose friend? Maitreya's friend. Who is Maitreya Rishi's friend? Your friend, the great sage, Krishna Dvepanna Vyasa has already described the transcendental qualities of the Lord in his great work, the Mahabharata. But the whole idea is to draw the attention of the mass of people to Krishna Katha, which is the special position of Mahabharata is given by it being inserted with the Bhagavad Gita inside it. So he says, this is what's the most attractive part of Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita. So through their strong affinity for hearing mundane topics. So Krishna talks about everything spiritual in the Bhagavad Gita and directions that it gives. So the great sage Krishna Dvepanna Vyasa is the author of all Vedic literatures, of which his works, Vedanta Sutra, Srimad Bhagavatam. How is Vedanta Sutra different to Srimad Bhagavatam? And how is Srimad Bhagavatam different to Mahabharata? Can anyone present it to me? Come on, this is Bhakti Vaibhava. Should be able to answer this question if someone asks. Vedanta means the conclusion of all the Vedic literatures. And the conclusion of all the Vedic literatures is put into a book called Vedanta Sutra, where it is coded into aphorisms. It's called Vedanta Sutra. Srimad Bhagavatam, the natural commentary, because all the conclusions has been compiled together and presented into short word aphorism phrases. When you expand it, it will give you the whole meaning of the conclusion of the Vedic literatures. But then you take the Vedanta Sutra, you expand each aphorism, then the different philosophers will expand it into different ways. But Vyasadeva, who wrote the Vedanta Sutra, he expands the meaning of the Vedanta Sutra and explain the Tika, the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. It becomes a Srimad Bhagavatam, because the ultimate conclusion of all the Vedas is to know Krishna, and Krishna is present in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Vedanta Sutra, the whole commentary on it by Vyasadeva comes the Srimad Bhagavatam. And what is comparatively different with Mahabharata? Mahabharata is the historical narrative of so many generations of kings leading up to the last kings in the age of Kali, after Maharaj Parikshit, Janmejaya, and so on, Ajnab. All these are explained in the Mahabharata, and then it ends there. So it is a historical narrative of the pastimes of all these kings, and there's a lot of beautiful stories because they're actually very pious people, pious kings and leaders. So the Mahabharata is a historical narrative. It is itihasa. But because it is written by Vyasadeva for the elaboration of Vedic principles, it is considered the Pancham Veda, the fifth Veda, because through the historical narratives, you can understand the scriptural principles of Vedic literatures. So that's a Mahabharata. And that's what I've explained. Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary. So please, these things are important. So Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata for the less intelligent class of man. Why? Because it is history, and within the history, you know, just like you tell your children, there was a king and there was a queen and there was a brahmana and there was this person and that person, history. And then by grandmothers and grandfathers narrating histories, they educate the kids. So similarly, Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata for the less intelligent class of men who are like children. They take more interest in mundane topics and the philosophy of life, because by the narrations, they will understand the principles. Okay? So the Vedanta Sutra was compiled for persons already above the mundane topics, because when you take the Vedanta Sutra, when you expand the Vedanta Sutras, it's in 4 parts, 4 padas. It actually expands into the Vedic philosophies, right? But from there, the conclusion to be drawn is that the Vedanta, the ultimate philosophical explanation, is a Bhagavata, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His pastimes, and therefore it is a Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, here you see in the fourth book, they have sutras like Tad Adhigam Adhikaranam, attainment of Brahman. Then there's others, Aprayana Adhikaranam, it's a small word, worship up to liberation. So it's all the sutras or just a small aphorism, right? And the small aphorisms are then expanded. Okay. He talks about those people who are without ashram, so on and so forth. So all these 555 aphorisms of Vedanta is there. This is a conclusion of all the Vedic literatures, 550 sutras. But I read it, I won't understand anything. So someone has to explain what it is all about. And someone explain what it is all about. It is Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam you can read because it's a Purana. Okay. So those persons, I'm reading further in the middle, those persons who are busy with the mundane inquiries which fill the newspapers and certain literatures are classified as Striya Shudra Dvija Bandhu, or women, the laborer class and unworthy sons of the higher class, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. So there are the Kshatriya Bandhus, and there's the Brahma Bandhus, and there's also the Vaishyas. Sometimes they're not properly initiated, they're not properly cultured. And then there's women and there's children, they're not properly cultured in Vedic knowledge. And this kind of transcendental literature is meant for them. Such less intelligent men cannot understand the purpose of Vedanta Sutra, although they may make a show of studying the Shastra in a perverted way. The real purpose of Vedanta Sutra is explained by the author himself in Srimad Bhagavatam. And anyone trying to understand Vedanta Sutra without reference to Srimad Bhagavatam is certainly misguided. So what is your question, Shalika?
Yeah, you just reading that last sentence just cleared one of my questions. I just wanted to summarize your explanation of the difference between Bhagavatam and Vedanta Sutra and Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata. I wanted to see if I captured the understanding. So the one part of it is the last sentence you just mentioned clearly summarizes the difference between the Bhagavatam and Vedanta Sutra, and the difference between Bhagavatam and Mahabharata is that in Bhagavatam is a description of the Lord's activities and his pastimes by the pure devotees, while the Mahabharata is the descriptions of different kingdoms and activities within the creation of the Lord. So I hope I
without
captured
without emphasis on Krishna.
Without emphasis on Krishna. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that addition.
Yes.
So that's what I wanted to summarize. Thank you.
It's a history of the narration of the history of the narrations of the history of the kings and whatever. And Krishna just happens to be in there sometimes. But emphasis on him is not there. Only emphasis on him is in the 4 books, in the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, which is in part of Mahabharata, right? It's there. Okay. So I will stop here, and please read through to chapter. I would advise you to read through till text 21, and then 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay. Then we will go into explaining. Next week, we will go into explaining the Maitreya Rishi explained the process of creation, how he explained the process of creation. Hopefully, we will reach there. And I will send you some some pictures, okay, of creation and so on, and then we will get into understanding it differently. All right, so this will conclude this chapter, this section. By next Saturday, Sunday, we will hopefully finish that. It will take a little time, and we may do another 3 sessions because it is actually a creation again. Okay, so, and then we will take maybe 3 sessions to finish it. But I'd like all the devotees to attend because this will be a crucial part of your understanding of creation. Okay, creation of the different elements, creation of the Adideva, Adibhuta, Adiyagya, all these things are very subtle, different, subtle things to understand. It requires a bit of mental energy. So please make the devotees attend, and we will hopefully do some seva for all of you. Thank you so much. Any questions? Any further questions, comments?
Yeah, maybe we'll allow you to go since you have an engagement. We want to thank you very much for your deep insight into the scriptures. We're very appreciative and grateful. And we pray that Guru Krishna will give us the proper intelligence to assimilate. Thank you so much.
Thank you.